Hey everyone. Today I'm going to mix things up slightly by presenting three problems which are progressively harder, which have a common theme. I hope that you enjoy them.
Let's take a look at this puzzle, which will illustrate the themes of the video. I'd encourage you to try to solve this one. It's not too difficult. I'll give you a few seconds. Let's look at the solution. Really, the main trick not to fall for is a8 queen, which is very natural, but after king c4 we see that queen takes f3 is stalemate. But if you don't take, for example, queen g8 check, then black can just play king d3 and this position ends up being a draw. Note that king takes c3 would be a mistake because of queen b3 with the skewer. So instead, in the initial position, we just play a8 bishop, under promoting, aka not promoting to a queen, and avoiding the stalemate tricks, because now after king c4, bishop takes f3, it's no longer stalemate, and we're just going to win with our passed pawn. Let's look at this puzzle here. It's white to move. It's a good warm-up puzzle with a funny twist, so feel free to solve it if you would like. Let's take a look at the solution now. So the first thing to note is that material is roughly even, and both sides have pass pawns which are going to run very quickly. So we can just get right into it. h6 is the only move for white not to lose. After this, black has a couple possibilities. a3 is natural. Let's see why rook c6 does not work. It does hit the pawn, and after h7, rook h6 is possible. But the pawn's defended, so white can play knight e7, and is just in time to stop black's pawn a3, and now knight c6 check. This is the important point. If you take, then white queens, and after king b7, knight b4 stops the pawn just in time. So black meets h6 with a3, and white also keeps pushing, h7, a2, and this is the most important moment of the composition. In this position, 999 times out of 1,000, you would just brainlessly think, okay, just promote to a queen, we stop a1 queen, and black resigns. But that's not the case here. Rook takes c8 check. This is extremely important, skewering the queen and forcing bishop takes c8, and now a1 queen. And this is the key point. Queen takes a1 is stalemate, but it turns out that the threat to the queen is too strong and black can end up saving this position. So in this position, it turns out that in most lines, black just ends up winning the bishop on c8 and trading to a king and pawn endgame. The queen always ends up getting in the way. For example, queen f8, queen a5 check, king d7 trying to hold on to the bishop, but then just queen d5 check, and this just ends up being a draw. For example, king e7, you would just play queen c5, trading the queens with a drawn position. White could also try queen g8 or a bunch of other things, but I'll just give one more sample line. Queen f6 check, king d7, queen f5 check, queen e6, trying to hold on to the bishop. And now it's important to note that this would actually be a losing mistake, because this endgame, black loses by one tempo. White gets this move in. But instead, after queen e6, just queen h7 check, putting the king to a worse square, and then trading queens with a drawn position, as we see that the king gets to g5 at the end. So as it turns out, due to tricky stalemate tricks, white cannot promote to a queen. But what's better than a queen? A bishop. Exactly. So white can promote to a bishop to stop a1 and avoid all the stalemate tricks. And now I'll just give a slightly unforced sample line to see how white might win this position. Rook c1, supporting a1, bishop e5 check, king b7, king d7, trade everything on a1, and now this bishop takes g4, and if we turn on the table base, we can see that this position is indeed losing for black. Essentially, white's just going to pick up the g3 pawn eventually, and then promote his pawn, and that's going to cost black the rook, and then white has a winning position with the knight and bishop. I just want to briefly share a bit of insight as to how I came up with that previous composition. I was actually inspired by this composition, and in particular the idea after the following moves. So here we see that both sides are about to queen, and it seems like black just wins simply. b2, g7, b1 queen, queen, and now just check with the skewer, and it seems like black just wins. But actually, after king d7, queen takes g8 is stalemate. So this ends up being a drawn position. Let's take a look at the last puzzle of this video. This one's white to move, so feel free to solve it if you would like. Let's look at the solution. So it begins with rook takes c6. I'll briefly note that e8 queen and rook f8 are both interesting moves which don't work, but they require black to play accurately, and you can look at the Lichess study if you want to see those variations. So after rook takes c6, queen takes c6, we note that bishop c5 would be checkmate if not for queen takes c5. So it's logical to play e8 queen in order to distract the queen, and after takes we just have checkmate. But this has a huge flaw. Specifically, black can play queen b5 check, a very weird check, still attacking the queen and the king, and queen takes b5 would be a stalemate. But white can't refuse this because, for example, king c1, queen b2, king d1, queen a1, bishop b1, and queen takes b1 is checkmate. So if e8 queen doesn't work because of stalemate, I think that by now most of you can see the theme that e8 bishop instead is the move. Of course, now queen b5 would no longer be stalemate because black has the b4 square. But here black can still force white to play accurately. For example, queen d5. Now queen a2 is a threat. For example, if white played some random move, then queen a2, king c1, queen b2, king d1, queen a1, bishop b1, and queen takes b1 would be checkmate. So queen a2 has to be stopped. Let's also just quickly note that bishop takes c3 looks like it works, but queen d1 forces probably one of the weirdest stalemates you'll ever see. White can stop queen a2 ideas by playing bishop f7. Again, taking would result in bishop c5 checkmate. So instead, black tries queen b5 check. And now there's a bit of a question. Which bishop do you block with? It turns out that you have to block the check with the c bishop. If you block with the f bishop, then after king b4, white's bishops are awkward, e2 is hit, and it's hard to push the b pawn. So instead, after bishop c to b3, queen takes e2 is not possible because of bishop c5 check. One trick that black might try is c2 check, which has a funny trap which I'll show. If white were to play king takes c2 in this position, that would actually be a really big mistake, because black has queen takes e2 check, and after king c1, queen e1 check, bishop d1, it seems like white has consolidated because black has no more safe checks. But actually, black can play queen c3 check, and bishop takes c3 is, again, a really bizarre stalemate, but white also can't escape the checks. For example, king b1, queen d3, king c1, queen c3 would be a perpetual check. However, after c2 check, white can just play king c1 and eventually convert the advantage here. So instead, black might try king b4 on the first move, but now just bishop f to c4. The bishops are beautifully coordinated, e2 is safe, the king is coming to c2, and white is going to win this position eventually. For example, queen a5, and now not king c2. This is the last trick to avoid. After queen a1, black would actually be the one winning here. But instead, just b7 first, tying down the queen, and then bishop d5, supporting the pawn, followed by king c2, with a winning advantage.
So that was the video. I really hope that you enjoyed it. Please subscribe if you haven't already so you can see more of my puzzles, and you can click here if you would like to see my previous video. Bye!